Hello. This video has been a long time coming and it has taken me a while, and I mean a while, to edit. So today I'm going to be building my desk setup for productivity and streaming. I am by no means a woodworker. The extent of my ability before this was building IKEA furniture, so there were many mistakes made and lessons that I learned through this experience. Overall, I would say that the woodworking was very minimal, but it made for an easy desk setup for both productivity and streaming. Be sure to stick around until the end to see the finished product. Essentially, I needed a space where I could move things around my desk so that I could film my art videos more easily. In some of my old videos, I used my dining room table to film, but I just felt bad using that space when my roommates wanted to either eat lunch or dinner. I also sometimes film late into the night or take breaks in between filming, so having my own space is nice. It also served as a place of productivity throughout quarantine as I was working from home. It's like you're opening up a present. Woohoo! I started out with getting and building 2 Alex drawer units from IKEA in the color white for my new tabletop to sit on top of. I've been really loving lighter colors lately, so I thought that the white drawers would match perfectly with my white computer case as well as the white keyboard and mouse. These drawers were from the desk section at IKEA, and they are each 14 1/8 of an inch wide by 22 7/8 of an inch deep, and they are 27 1/2 inches tall. Each of these drawer units have 5 drawers, and I use them mostly to store my art supplies in. We had some issues with building the actual drawers when we had to hammer in these plastic pegs. We also didn't have a hammer, so we were just using the back of the screwdriver to push those pegs into place. It ended up working well when I would hold the pieces steady while Alvin hammered the pegs into place. With a little teamwork and mostly Alvin's hard work, we finished all of them. There were a couple of accidents where some of the wood chipped in the corner from the hammering, but I've been using these drawers for half a year now and I haven't had any issues with the drawers. Also, the drawers came with these non-slip rubber stops for the tabletop to sit on top of. Rather than buying a tabletop from IKEA, I decided to buy a piece of plywood from Lowe's. Part of the reason for choosing plywood over one of those tabletops from IKEA was because I have a lot of equipment that I wanted to clamp or mount onto my desk. Among the recommendations for the tabletop to my desk were many pieces of wood and even an unfinished door, but I ended up choosing maple plywood from Lowe's. They also cut the wood to the correct size of the desk that I wanted, so I went for a 3 feet wide by 6 feet long desk, and the piece of plywood is 3/4 of an inch thick. The first thing I wanted to do with the wood was sand down the rough edges to get rid of any splinters that might be sticking out of the wood and to prepare the wood for sealing. Since this all happened in January when it was freezing outside, we actually just did all of this in the living room by laying down a tarp to catch all of the sawdust. In hindsight, I definitely think it would have been better to do it outside and not worry about getting all of the sawdust everywhere. Are you having fun yet? We sanded the edges of the wood and the top by hand first with 100 grit sandpaper and then with 220 grit sandpaper. I learned that lower grit numbers were more coarse while the higher grit numbers were more fine sandpaper. Since the plywood was relatively smooth when we started, we didn't have to do any intense sanding. We started out using the 100 grit sandpaper to get rid of any of the bigger rough areas and then went in with 200 grit sandpaper to smooth out the wood. So in these clips, obviously you see that we did all of the sanding by hand. Even though we were only sanding the edges and the top of the wood, it still took a pretty long time. It would have been nice to use an electric sander for this, but sanding by hand worked out in the end. Although a couple of weeks after, I actually found out a better technique for sanding by hand. So a couple of weeks after my desk was more put together, my family visited me and my dad and brother helped to cut some of the leftover plywood into extra support for my desk using a circle saw. I haven't really put the support to use yet. Out of all of my family, my dad and little brother are definitely the most handy, so I'll talk through a bit of what they did. They started by measuring the wood to the height of my desk. Then they used the straight edge from another piece of wood as a guide for where my dad was going to cut the plywood and used clamps to hold that guide down. They also taped around the plywood with some masking tape to help reduce the splintering as the wood was cut. I was actually really embarrassed and worried about getting a noise complaint because I live in an apartment complex currently and my dad was just cutting this piece of wood out on my balcony, but we made it through with no noise complaints. And then here's them showing me the better way for sanding by hand. They wrapped the sandpaper around a block of wood and then they used the flat edge to sand down the wood evenly. It also gave them a much better grip on the sandpaper, so they were able to sand a lot quicker than what I had done for the top of my desk. I contemplated resanding and refinishing my desk after I learned that sanding technique, but it was too late because I had already attached everything to my desk. I am moving apartments soon, so I'll think about it, but I might be too lazy for that. Since I'll be using my desk for a lot of art, I wanted to protect the wood. So to finish and seal the wood, I got a can of Minwax fast drying polyurethane in the clear satin finish. This is a clear oil-based protective finish for wood. I had an entire debate between getting a water-based and oil-based polyurethane, but I ended up going for the oil-based because it was the cheaper option, lasted longer, and also gave the wood an amber glow. The downside to the oil-based one is that it has a strong odor as you're applying it, and you have to wait a while in between the coats. We had to do 2 coats of the polyurethane, and we waited about 5 hours in between the coats. I was really thankful that my friend Singy knew what she was doing with the finish. We used paper towels to apply the finish to the wood, and we made sure to apply a small amount at a time and to use long strokes to spread the finish in one direction. So you see us applying the finish only in the same direction as the grain of the wood and wiping off any excess. We also decided to seal the edges of the wood. I had bought a 32 fluid ounce can of polyurethane, but this was way too much for the single piece of wood that I wanted to finish. I don't think we even used a fourth of the can, so you can definitely save and get a smaller amount. After we finished staining, we waited a day before putting the desk together. We started by placing the drawers where they needed to go and the right distance apart from each other. Then we just placed the piece of wood on top. I can say after using this desk for half a year that I haven't had any problems with it and that it has been very sturdy. Then I just started doing some organization for my art supplies while Alvin helped to set up all of the wiring and put the monitor arms and base for my mic arm on my desk. I had wanted to get both a mic arm and monitor arms for a while so that I could use 2 monitors and also have a mic for recording my videos, so I was really thankful to my friends who had actually gifted them to me during Christmas. The monitor arms and mic arm give me the freedom to move them out of the way when I want to film art videos on my desk. We kept adjusting them until I was happy with where the monitors were. Currently, a lot of my wires are a little short, so I need to figure out some better cable management in the future. I also don't love that the edges of the tabletop are unfinished, and I considered getting edging to finish the edges of my desk, but my dad convinced me that this is a temporary solution for a desk and gives me the freedom to change it up whenever I want. Now, even though this desk is what my dad called temporary, this was by no means a cheap desk. Maybe if I already owned cabinets or drawers, then I would only have needed to get the piece of wood, but all of the pieces and supplies probably totaled to around $250 in the end. But I think it was worth it for this learning experience. After building my desk, I definitely would like to try more woodworking in the future, but maybe like the far future, because this desk was a lot of work. So this is the before and after of my desk. Now for the final overview and tour of how my desk looks. I'm going to move this chair out of the way, but this is the Marcus from IKEA. Going through everything attached to my desk, the first thing we have is the mic arm, and I'm currently using the Rode Pod mic for all of my voice recordings. It's really easy to swing this mic arm out of the way when I want to use my desk for art. Then moving up, I have a desk lamp. This is nice at night if I want to just get a little more light to see what I'm doing. It's also nice because I can change between the yellow and white light. Obviously, I have my desktop computer sitting on the corner of my desk, and then right now I'm currently using my Canon EOS 80D as my webcam. I still haven't found a good place to position the camera, but it's nice to use and I just have it plugged into an Elgato capture card. Here are my many wires that need some organization, and then my mic is attached to the Cloudlifter, and then the Focusrite Scarlett Solo audio interface. Moving over, here's a quick peek at my mouse and keyboard, and then we have two monitors that are attached to monitor arms. Similar to the mic arm, I will just move the monitors up and out of the way when I want to record art on my desk. It's really easy for me to move out of the way. Then finally, in the back corner of my desk, I have a mug that I use as a pen holder and then a marker organizer. And that is a quick tour of my desk. I think we did a really great job on this desk, and it is a nice amount of space to use for filming and art. I'm also looking forward to using this setup for streaming. I built my PC last fall. Well, Alvin built my PC last fall. And it was around that time that I started playing games a decent amount, and specifically a lot of Valorant. It gave me the idea that it'd be a lot of fun to share my games with others. So I'll be having my first Twitch livestream Friday, June 18th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you have some time, I would love it if you would stop by and say hi. You don't need to make a Twitch account to watch, so you can just type in twitch.tv/RebeccaWho3 in a browser to find me. I'm really excited to start streaming some games and art over on Twitch, and I can't wait to see you there. So that is it. I hope you enjoyed watching me build my desk. I know that this wasn't very woodworking heavy, but I do think that it is an easy desk setup for both productivity and streaming. I hope you learned something, as I definitely did through this process. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!